Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 2 of the anime series Grimgar of Fantasy and Ash. Let me get it out of the way right away and reiterate, much as I did in my multi-episode 1 video, discussion video, where I was talking about the first episode of this particular series. I will not be picking this up for episodic coverage. I did just want to chime in once again because this episode, once again, gave me certain things that I found really genuinely compelling, but by and large, did I have problems with it. The pacing, certain creative choices that they made, which are questionable, at least to me, things that I really didn't like about it, and I really wanted to talk about it a little bit more, flesh it out a little bit more along those lines. So I will not be picking this one up episodically. I hesitate to even suggest I might watch the third episode at this point. I didn't even watch the PV for the next episode. Don't know if there was one attached to it, because by the end of the episode, I was just so frustrated I didn't care. I was like, I don't care what comes next. I don't even think I'm on board for it. And, that's just my own personal reaction to this. I can only voice my own individual perspective on things. That isn't to say, as much as it left me feeling, sort of like I don't want anything to do with it, that this episode was without interesting aspects and compelling aspects. And that's what I want to talk about as well. Once we kind of get past this opening cap sequence, a very slowly, long, drawn-out, dialogue sequence, which was not without its insights as well, but it just kind of felt like it went nowhere. The most notable thing out of which was like the idea that these characters are still holding over vague remembrances of who they were in the world they left behind. You have the one character who's going out for a late-night drink, and he has an idea that he likes to drink and everything like that, but he's not sure why. He's not sure why he has that sensation. The other, somewhat younger character probably has never had a drink, and that's why he doesn't really remember if he likes it or not. So these aspects, once again, holding over to wherever they came from, wherever they were taken from, however that exchange happened, is intriguing to me, but they just don't play on that enough for my taste. Like, that's what I really want to learn about, know about. The sort of chief heated element of this episode was when they all get together as a group and go after this singular goblin. As we know from the first episode, multiple goblins are a little out of their, element, beyond their reach. And the whole procedure of this was unnerving and thus highly compelling to me, because it is, for all intents and purposes, a role-playing game, RPG kind of world, kind of framework, complete with magic, but there is an element of real legitimate life and death and stakes in the battle with this creature. It's a living creature that is not quite an animal. Like, it is humanoid, and it has probably its own language, maybe, and form and function, thought process, whatever like that. But it is somewhat animalistic and instinctive in this whole battle. It's very pensive, and they have to chase it down, and it is trying to fend off their attacks for the sake of its own life. So that, to me, it was just horrifying that they actually had to, like, bludgeon and murder this creature. And this is having shocking effects on the characters. Suddenly I was like, well, hell yeah. I mean, I'm the type of person, I look down upon hunting and animal abuse. I can't even stand the idea of hurting animals and those types of things. And then it's kind of, escalated that much further by a humanoid creature who, do we know if we can communicate with them? Like, what the hell? It's just a strange framework. And then it's not, sort of dwindled down to that idea of hacking and slashing or, turn-based combat, that kind of thing. It is real, legitimate life and death. It isn't a game. It isn't fake. It isn't pretend. You don't put in another quarter and just, beat somebody up, button mash, whatever, or strategize, whatever, the gaming aesthetic happens to be for a particular RPG, sort of game. And the effects that this has. Now, it really called back to me memories growing up watching a TV series by the name of MASH, which really sort of was cleverly able to mix comedy with the horrors of war, life and death, people being on the front lines of war and their lives being taken, and how, these doctors, it was about a mobile army surgical hospital in the Korean War, how these doctors would kind of let their hair down after dealing with hours and hours upon hours of having to sew these young soldiers, men and women, back up after being nearly killed, that kind of stuff. And I felt like that entire sequence, fighting the goblin, was akin to that. It was really graphically showing you the horror of this scenario. And for a few minutes, once it's said and done, you have Ranta coming in there like Mr. Annoying. Like, hey, I want to punch this kid in the face. He is the one because, he's so after that vice, that thing he's trying to get for himself, a demon he can summon. He's in such a blackguard mood after this. It's compelling. Like, it speaks to, I feel like he's the most loose cannon character, where of course it's going to affect him the most because he's the most flamboyant, he's the most off the cuff, impetuous, and he really hasn't taken this seriously. And suddenly it's thrust upon him to have to murder another living creature. It's going to have ill effects. With his personality, that much more so. I mean, I was starting to wonder how he kind of, just chucks it off his shoulder by the end of the episode. He's trying to get a peep at the girls in the bathhouse. Is there some kind of psychotic mentality for this kid? Like, I don't know. He just seemed to let it go after a while. After some mulling, he did mull it over for a little bit. But this brings us to the problem of this episode. I feel like there should have been something a little more vibrant, a little more bubbly after that entire horrific sequence. And rather than that, do we get this melancholy, melodic, musical sequence that, at least to me, felt like it took up half the episode. It was beautiful seeing, characters wandering around this RPG environment and really getting attuned to this world. I mean, if it were just a little more lively, I would have been chomping at the bit to watch every sequence. I was kind of, looking at the backgrounds and everything. I was thinking, yeah, this is really beautiful, but why do we suddenly have a frickin' music video where that's all we're getting? And for the most of it, we don't even see what the characters are doing. As it's starting to finally taper off to its end, this musical segment, do we see the one guy carving an airplane and like that? Once again, calling back to the world they left behind. I was like, can I jump into the screen and tell him how, applaud them, tell him how compelling and interesting this is as he's looking at this wooden carved plane that he made and he's, holding it up in front of the sunset and everything like that. It's just, whoa. More of this, please. Instead of this melancholy, again, musical number. I was like, is the show over? Like, did I misread the timestamp? Did something get, misconstrued in the editing of the stream of this episode where the ending music is beginning? I didn't know. It was just really off-putting to me because it was stretching it out, lumbering along, not having anything happen. And all you're really meant to do, and really the only thing you can do to try to stomach it, to try to bide your time, like, it wasn't that the song itself was off-putting. It was a very melodic piece. But it was slowly paced, and all you can really do to save yourself is just look at the backgrounds. Or in my case, alternate between looking at the screen and watching what's happening, and looking over at the book sitting at my right side on my couch, and thinking, I'd like to get back to reading that. How long is this going to go on? Can I maybe flip through a chapter by the time it's done? And again, yeah, that end stuff with Mr. Perviranta. He's the only one whose name I know at this point. Just because he is, like, I just want to grab him by his hair and knock him and, cold cock him in the face. Because he is a little dick, Like, I don't know. It just, there's nothing for me to really grasp onto as yet. Maybe I'll give this a third episode watch. But I'm going to be struggling. Like I said, I didn't even watch the PV. And I wrote down, just to remind myself, I have a little note sheet off camera. I wrote down 2 other shows. One I've already talked about the first episode, but Phantasy Star Online 2, the animation. I loved episode 2. I'm loving everything about PSO2, the animation, but I loved the debut of this really kooky, quirky character, Suzuki, who is like this blonde chick who's familiar with Phantasy Star Online, and it was just, you know, for comedic effect, she's very awkward, and she's like following the main guy into the bathroom and watching him pee and everything, like, he stops her, but, I mean, the charm and the wit and the characterization in that show, the pacing of that show, I'm much more invested than this particular series. Another one is, and I've only seen the first episode. I think only the first episode is, out as of the time of this recording. The Japanese title is, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Kono Subarashi Sekai ni Shukufuku wo, or Give Blessings to This Wonderful World. Very much has a vibe akin to Danmachi, which was a series I absolutely loved. Basically the translation being, is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? That was a very lively, boisterous series. And this series, again, Give Blessings to This Wonderful World, from right off the bat, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I love the vibe. I love the chemistry of the characters. I love just that whole vibrance of the backdrop. And both of these series are dealing with sort of fantasy role-playing game, a little bit more sci-fi in Phantasy Star Online 2, the animation. But, both of these are dealing with those familiar anime aesthetics in crossing over with the RPG game framework. Both are a hell of a lot more entertaining thus far for me than Grimgar, I'm sorry to say. If you're loving Grimgar, I can't really speak to it other than to say it's just to each their own in a bag of chips. It's just the way I'm reacting to it is not very well. And that's just how it is. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Love it or hate it in the comments below. Grimgar, Fantasy and Ash, episodes 1 and 2. Are you loving it? I would actually be highly interested to hear, if you're loving it, why that is. I had one of my good friends telling me about the reasons they were into the series thus far, and those kinds of things, hailing back to Log Horizon, which was another comparison I made. But again, Log Horizon felt that much more investing because the characters had personality. They were doing things. They were active. A lot of this story so far is characters sitting around talking, and they're not even really investigating where they are, which should be the most notable thing on everyone's mind. Instead, they're just kind of going with the flow, and they're doing it at a very slow pace. I mean, you have the one character looking up at the moon. Oh, the moon was red. Well, it wasn't red in the other place. That's just weird. And then it's never spoken of again. And they're just peppering these ideas in very minute amounts all through the episodes. And it's like, that's what I want to know more about. Please inject this series with some level of liveliness. Get characters doing something. And the thing is, like I say, that's my chief complaint. Well, okay, we had this big goblin war, battle going on. So the characters were doing something. But the thing is, it was more disconcerting than enjoyable to watch, than entertaining, than engrossing. Like the after effects, it was like, okay, well, now we're going to be dealing with these characters psychologically being affected by this. We're not. Anybody else on board with me along these lines? Am I the only one having issues with this? Let me know in the comments below. Love hearing from you. Even if our POVs happen to disagree, as I always say, just love having that conversation. So otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this, and hope this video finds you well. Good luck to you if you're sticking with this show, and I'll catch you later. Peace.